welcome you all to the Wednesday night get-together for Rotary, and I have a video to show which was a speaker at the Toronto Convention. So if you were unable to attend the convention, you probably did not see the speaker. But the topic is water and sanitation, and I think you'll find the speaker very interesting. So if there's nothing else at the moment, we can just go right into the video and we can discuss it a little bit later. Okay.
How long does it take you to brush your teeth? Well, you have to start by brushing the front of your teeth. You go to the sides, and then you struggle sometimes with those teeth towards the end, right? And you just can't help but think about that piece of meat that's stuck in between your teeth. Then you have to clean your tongue, even though sometimes we forget about our tongue. And then you're there, rinsing your mouth. Sometimes we may even get the urge to play with water inside our mouth, but it feels so fresh. Well, during the time that it took you to brush your teeth, a child under 5 died of diarrhea. That's how long it takes. Every 60 seconds, a child dies from a preventable and treatable disease. A significant portion of diarrheal disease can be prevented through safe drinking water and adequate sanitation and hygiene. So what 3 things are essential to your health? Water, sanitation, and hygiene, or what we call WASH. Today, over 3 billion people worldwide are trapped in a cycle of poverty and disease because they lack access to safe and sufficient drinking water, basic sanitation, and hygiene. Having access to WASH is essential to living a life in dignity and upholding human rights. Yet over 3 billion people still do not have these fundamental rights. That it's half of humanity. That it's 1 out of every 2 of you. But it is even more alarming. Sometimes we forget that most of the water that we have in the planet is salt water. Out of all the water in the world, less than 3% is fresh water. And of that fresh water, 68.9 is frozen in glaciers, 30.8 is underneath the earth as groundwater, and only 0.3 is readily available. And this very tiny portion is not always that fresh. This is the portion that is available for human consumption, 0.3. And this is the proportion that is threatened the most by natural and man-made contaminants. So waterborne diseases that are caused by known microorganisms are barely at the tip of the iceberg. What is below the iceberg, it's what is more critical. We still do not have effective treatment in many parts of the world for many contaminants, such as many pharmaceuticals and metals. What about neglected tropical diseases that are on the rise in many countries? Poor water quality of the limited resources we have affects the water quantity because we cannot reuse the water. It costs more to treat polluted rivers for drinking, agriculture, and bathing. Yet every day we continue to pour millions of tons of untreated sewage and industrial and agricultural waste into our world's water systems, creating a heavy burden on communities. So when we take into account water quality, there's much less than the 0.3 of the fresh water available. To address this problem, as well as many other critical issues around the world, the international community has adopted the target that we know, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Goal number 6 calls for the world to achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. It also calls for adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all, and end open defecation once and for all. But we need talented individuals to reach this goal. However, the reality is that universal and safe WASH coverage by 2030, it's not achievable with the current global human resources. We need more people. A recent study by the International Water Association found that we're still lacking 787,000.
Can we please mute ourselves so that there's no background noise, please?
Trained water and sanitation professionals to reach this universal WASH coverage. So what you see in gray in these graphs is the people that we're missing. And this is only based on countries who have data to assess this. Imagine what the true picture would be if we included countries that lack data on human capacity. So not only are we lacking in trained WASH individuals, but many of them have challenges accessing the wealth of knowledge that we have collected and analyzed in this sector. Now, picture these books at the top as the global WASH knowledge available. Everything that in theory we need to know about how to get clean water and good health. And people have to get to them to obtain the knowledge. Closest to the books, we have the WASH researchers. These are the people who do scientific research, the universities and think tanks, where access to WASH resources, the knowledge and learnings, it's easily accessible. Then we have the WASH specialists. These are international agencies, large funders, and government entities. Sometimes they have difficulty assessing all of the data that is available. Further away from the books, we have the WASH project managers. These are international NGOs at country level, local NGOs, social enterprises, and the local government. But the furthest away from the books are the community workers, who are the people on the ground, interacting with community members to create change. The furthest away from the learnings where the knowledge should be trickling down easily. I'd like to tell you about TJ. He lives in the Pemon indigenous community in one of the most isolated regions in the world, in the Canaima National Park in Venezuela. He started becoming very ill when his body was covered in blisters. So one day, he went to see a rural doctor who was the person who shared this story with me. He walked many kilometers under the sun with his blisters, barefoot, in the jungle. And when he got there, not even the doctor could figure out what was happening. Little did he know that he was drinking mercury from the river next to a mine where people use mercury to extract gold. He did not know the link between mercury and his health. And even the scientific community is barely beginning to understand now the relationship between mercury and pemphigus foliaceus. To find ways to reach universal and safe WASH coverage by 2030, we need to focus on bridging this larger gap. Rotary can, because of the large network of people we have throughout the world. Just look around here. This is amazing. We all seem to recognize that capacity building needs to happen. And yet we consistently fail to put enough resources towards it. To really bridge this education gap, we must focus on 4 things: invest, measure, network, and empower. First, we have to keep investing in WASH education, particularly in developing countries, in 2 ways. Through WASH education programs, like the WASH in Schools programs, and through global grant scholarships. Let's create innovative knowledge practitioners who are willing to bring WASH knowledge from the top of the chain to the community workers. I am an example of your investment. Rotary invested in my graduate research in Brazil. This has led to the development of scientific publications and a much-needed international research collaboration. But it made me a WASH advocate with passion, which brought me to you today. It made me passionate about working in WASH education to lessen this gap. I'd like to tell you now about Pius, the man in the center of this picture. Pius had to carry 20 liters of water in his head 5 times a day while in school. Just a week ago, he reminded me of the day when he was playing with a friend in his school, and the next day he was burying him because of typhoid. And he thought this was normal, until a teacher told him, "Heads are not meant to carry water. They are made for us to think." Many years later, he became the project manager of a WASH in Schools program, where he spent countless of hours talking to the children about washing their hands. This is the hardest part of education, the behavioral changes. The children now want to be like him because they associate him with health. Rotary invested in him, and he's now a role model for these children. That's what we need. Dedicating time to others has infinite value. The man in this picture is called Francis. Francis also fetched water. When he was young, he would wake up every day and walk 1 kilometer to a swamp to fill his clay pot. When he was 11 years old, he noticed blood and mucus in his feces and spent 10 days in the hospital. He had dysentery, and he thought this was normal. After 50 years, he wrote a proposal to a Rotary club to create a WASH program for his school. And he's now spending countless of hours implementing the education program. And this is not only in the school that he attended, but in 30 schools in his community. This is the power of dedicating time to others. We can use our talents to be involved in education rather than just being donors. If you're a Rotarian teaching in primary schools, you know how to structure curriculums. If you're a journalist, you know how to write publicity for W.A.S.H projects. If you're on the ground with the beneficiaries, focus on hands-on practice instead of only focusing on knowledge acquisition or bringing an expert to talk about disease transmission. Let's empower each other. Let's just pause for a second and think about what you can do. What can you do? What can you do to help bridge this education gap? The second thing that we should focus on is to measure the need for human resources. When I visited the community of Caliciso, I was stunned to find that many girls dropped out of school due to a lack of menstrual hygiene management because they don't have sanitary pads, something that is so normal. But I was even more shocked to find that we don't know how many of these girls do not reach secondary education. There is very little data available on the human capacity for water and sanitation services. But Rotarians are on the ground. They're in the places where W.A.S.H professionals are needed. We can measure, and we can do it through our global network. The third thing that we should focus on is to network. This is Joseph. He's also Ugandan. When I met him, he was already a Rotarian. In 2 short weeks that I visited his community, I only got to go to 10 out of the Terry schools he wanted to work on. So I panicked and I said, Joseph, how are we going to know what the nearest water source is to all these schools? They're all so far. How do we know what the real need is for W.A.S.H in these schools? It turned out that Joseph also worked for the Ministry of Water and the Environment in Uganda. He connected the program with district health inspectors who had all of this data. He connected the program with multiple Rotary clubs in the country. He also connected the program with a university, getting volunteers to help gather even more data in schools around the district. So by using the Rotary network and relationship, he connected people with passion towards a common goal. The fourth and most powerful thing we should focus on is to empower. This is Rachel in her village. She's measuring the water quality, and even though this is normal for her, she grew up not accepting that she would have to live with constant stomach pain because of water. When I met Rachel, she was shadowing health inspections. She wanted to learn more about water, but she felt that she didn't have enough resources. When she joined a Rotary W.A.S.H in Schools program, she realized that there was a need to test the water in each of the schools, so she became a district health inspector. And she pursued her education even further. She started to believe in herself. What struck me the most about Rachel is what she said to me one day. She said, Isis, you just, by standing here and talking to these people in my village, have empowered me in many more ways that you can imagine. To realize that I have the power to change things. You know, this was the first time that I learned the enormous impacts of my actions, and it wasn't too long ago. So let's empower each other to create meaningful change. Take the time to learn how you can use your skills in W.A.S.H today. Come to the breakout session later today. Thank you for what you do for Rotary. Safe and sufficient access to W.A.S.H is a fundamental right for all, but we have to believe in it. So remember, invest, measure, network, and empower others to bridge the gap. If you care about ending hunger, you need clean water. If you care about peace and conflict resolution, you need clean water. If you care about ending polio, you need clean water. We need clean water to make the world a better place. Thank you.
Yay.
And the message is we need clean water. And the United Nations goal is by 2030, and Rotary is adopting that same goal with Haiti. So that's very interesting.
You know, you move into different levels of all of this. There are people in communities that have to walk 5 miles and come back with a bucket of water on their head. South Florida and Florida is full of water all over the place. We are so water conscious that we have divided Florida up into different water control areas, and we have governing bodies and governing boards for those areas. And they essentially set the rules for how you can use the water and when you can use the water, and if you can put stuff on your lawn to make it greener, and when you can and when you can't, you know. And it's really very encouraging, but it is so much under pressure. There's over 20 million people in Florida.
Wow.
And they're all drawing from the same water. It's all groundwater.
And it's all one big carbonate sponge.
That's exactly right. You know, so very interesting. You know, I pay for water and sewer by the month, and it takes care of all of that. Everybody else does too. It's not cheap. It's $600 or $700 a year for my water and sewer, you know, that I used to catch in the Virgin Islands for free because it was rainwater. Well, it wasn't for free because I had to maintain it.
Sure, yeah.
And then I had just simply dumped the waste into a septic tank. Well, there's septic tanks here too, but they are highly regulated, you know, because they're putting them into groundwater. In the Virgin Islands, we didn't have any groundwater. You know, it was all caught water. So interesting to watch this happen, you know. So there's water wars everywhere.
But when you realize that you need water, there has to be some regulation to it and action taken to protect it. So very interesting.
It was kind of interesting that she talked a lot about, oh, we need to provide water, we need to provide water. The whole water and sanitation thing, there's a whole nother element of how you provide it, how you organize maintaining it, and how you get people who have a lot of financial demands on themselves to decide they're going to use and maintain it rather than falling back to traditional sources, even if they're not clean. And that is much more, I didn't really hear her going there. I think she was trying to raise people's desire for the vast and boundless sea on that speech. But I know with the Haiti Water Project, one of the things that I've got in mind and that I know Neil has in mind is that it's a lot more complicated than just we'll decide to put our priority onto providing water somehow. It's, especially if you want to get anywhere close to universal coverage, it gets much more complicated, which I'm sure the Neil knows how to address.
Yep, you need a government or a governing body of some kind.
Sure, yeah.
Well, you also need to be paying attention to water from the point of view of the users, or else it's one place where you can really pour a lot of money down holes, literally, and accomplish nothing, because what you were doing really wasn't what people were interested in the first place, no matter how much you think they should be. I mean, if motivation could be completely external, the cholera epidemic in Haiti would ensure that everybody in Haiti is going to use a clean source of water. And surprisingly, that didn't happen near to the extent we would have thought. So it just gets more complicated.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I'm not having to make the decisions, but that's what I understand is true about India as well, that people, or whether it was Rotary or not, putting in even latrines into India or toilets, and the people didn't want them. They wanted to go out in the field. So whether they had a toilet or not wasn't the reason that they were defecating in the fields.
Same in Haiti, and there's some very specific reasons why the idea of any kind of pit latrine is not as appealing as open defecation. And some of those reasons are not bad reasons. There's definitely some trade-offs. Potable water is a little different because people know that they need it, but there's a lot more going in than just, oh, you should have clean water and then automatically you will want it.
Yeah.
It's still a good project that we're doing. It's still good that the lady in this video is consciousness raising, just for people to get it on their radar. Mm-hmm. But as a 20-year veteran of trying to provide that water and sanitation.
But what you were saying about India and other places, the toilet is not building a toilet and giving them, because I have seen it in many parts of Africa and Ethiopia.
Yeah.
When you don't have a running water, when you don't have the proper pipes, to have inside a house a toilet and not to be able, because the flushing doesn't work, the plumbing doesn't work, then you get into more problems inside your house rather than the plumbing, is the water availability. Sometimes there are times there is no water, even in the cities, that you don't have water for 3-4 days.
Well, I think also it's the maintenance and the sustainability of any project. Because
they'd rather do what they know and is far away from home, and instead of having it at home and they can't use it, or if children even use it, then you have no way of flushing whatever they do. So those are the issues. It's very complicated. Not that they choose to go outside, but it's the planning, it's the water availability, unreliable water system. So like Denise, you were saying that they go and bring it 5 miles, but like in hot places, in hot areas, when they get the water, full pot of water or whatever they have it, by the time they get home, it's evaporated, half of it with the heat. So it's a lot of issues. Water is a must, and if they have water, constant reliable supply, then they'll get used to it and use it well.
Anyway, this speaker was the Water and Sanitation Rotarian Action Group ambassador. So I guess that's when she talks about Rotary investing in her. That's what she's talking about. That Rotary has invested in her.
I think Rotary invested in a project that she was doing, or a program that she was hired for.
Yes.
Rotary is investing everywhere, also in Ethiopia, a lot of areas, a lot of villages. When you go, the water, where they have water pipes or whatever they have, is Rotary sponsoring it. Some of it is the EU, some of it United Nations, but mainly it's Rotary. And you see, you go to these villages, remote villages, and you see the Rotary name, and this is funded by Rotary. It makes you proud.
Anyway, that's the water and sanitation, and we started off with the telephone and internet scams. So be aware of that, because that one is incredible. That the threat that they're going to arrest you, and there's an arrest warrant out for you, and it's going around right now. So
That was
anyway,
really dark. I've never heard that one before.
I know, and it was similar. It wasn't the same person or the same call, but I had it 2 weeks ago. So they're making the rounds, and yeah.
In Florida, they've said, on TV, I don't know, Denise, if you heard it on Channel 10, they were repeatedly saying that it's exactly what Kitty told us. They say that they call the elderly people and they're telling them you'll get arrested if you don't pay right away today. And some of them even knocking on the door, they say, and they've told them on TV, and they've posted it also in a lot of buildings where there is condos.
Yeah.
Beware. And then the IRS also issued a statement: we never call you, never send anybody. We write you, and you'll see the official, letterhead. And don't worry, we don't do that. So ignore it. They say, just don't answer, don't do anything.
Unfortunately, if you send out 100 calls, and one person responds, or 1,010 respond, a very small portion. I mean, this guy has given up $9,000.
And in Florida, a lot of people have given. They gave their credit card for $300, and it was maxed out. And that's why they were telling us all that, because there are a lot of elderly people, they get scared. Take my credit card. They give them away.
I know.
It's just some people with early dementia who will fall for that.
But I don't think you need
I
don't think you need to have early dementia to fall for it. Unfortunately, there is a gullible portion of the population that, and even I remember 60 Minutes quite a few years ago, they were doing a story on this, and the elderly woman, granted she was an elderly woman, had given, oh goodness, like $100,000 to this scam artist, and 60 Minutes went through the research and said to her, this is a scam. This is not, it's not valid. And she continued to send money regardless. It was just unbelievable. And then 60 Minutes got involved with the guy and interviewed him, and I think he was arrested. but these guys, and again, I think it's the fact that if they didn't have these little burner phones, if those burner phones were illegal, you would have a lot less of the opportunity to scam people. Very interesting. Anyway, that's my program for this evening. So
I normally look those things up in white pages. I'll just accrue a bunch of them and I'll write down the numbers. And I have a program called White Pages, and it's a search program.
Yeah.
And they're all over the place, Mainly, every once in a while, I'll call one of the numbers back. And I'll get this number is no longer in service.
Yeah.
I'll get there is no record of this number. I mean, all sorts of things. So there's all kinds of ways that they do this. It doesn't necessarily even matter that they have a little scam phone or a throwaway phone. They can do it by co-opting real numbers.
Anyway, listen, thank you very much for taking the time out. I'm going to ask who would like to lead the four-way test, or should I?
Wayne would.
Wayne, go ahead. Unmute yourself, Wayne. Yes.
Okay. Please repeat after me the things we say and do as Rotarians. Is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Is it fair to all concerned?
Is it
fair to all concerned?
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
And will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
It is fun.
It is fun.
Don't
Excellent.
And don't wear socks, of course.
Super. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.